I'm having some problems with some images.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm having some problems with images. I'm not sure what's going on. I've got that ASI 294 color camera. It's cool. And I'm doing like 5-minute exposures, and I just can't get it to give me anything I want. It's the image is really dark.
Well, you know what? Last time that Brian gave a presentation, I
Right.
think part of that was calibrating the camera. And I think Bob Butwell, you were like, it was a revelation to you, the information that he gave us, right?
I remember being amazed. I don't remember the detail though.
So I'm pretty sure that's on the video
Calibrating the,
that we did that. I don't remember if I recorded that whole thing or not, but I know that I remembered he was talking about both the image processing with PixInsight and also calibrating the camera. And it was
Right.
an ASI camera. And he was talking about changing the no, I'm drawing a blank.
it's coming back to me.
The histogram. He was talking about
Right.
changing the histogram, shifting that. Yeah.
It
Yeah,
was,
with the offset or something. But what I've ended up doing is I've taken my camera and I used the Sharp Cap feature, the sensor analysis.
Right.
I'm trying to rule out the camera, that something's wrong with the camera. So it'll tell you where you're what's that gain, unity gain and all that is at. So I ran that sensor analysis. That checked out right. And I'm doing the pictures. The only thing I'm waiting for is some clear nights, not windy, where I could use, they have an exposure calculator at Nina, where you could take your numbers that you get from the sensor analysis from SharpCap, and it'll tell you what you actually should be doing an exposure at. But I always thought unity gain's about where you want to be. I'm just kind of surprised M81's coming out so bad. A lot of data, but I can't do much with it.
it's coming back to me. What he talked about was the graph of sensitivity and noise and how two curves intersected, which gave you an ideal exposure. But I'd have to be looking at the graphs. It was kind of esoteric and not the kind of thing that you can just go, oh yeah, it's that simple. It's something you have to study.
Yeah, I'm switching to Nina just to be able to use that function to nail down the exposure better. I've had the RC6, and with the RC8, I'm just not liking the photos I'm getting. It's just been, I don't know, it's just kind of washed out. I look at the mirror, it doesn't look very dirty.
Yeah, John, I've got the 294 mono, right? And then I have the RC6 as well. And so I've only done a little bit of that before winter set in. And then last week, Friday, I took everything out and I had, I basically started over just to guide and all that. So I don't have any results except, short exposures, long exposures for guiding. That's what I was after session. But yeah, I was going to look at his video and
yeah, I'll have to check that out again.
I'm looking at the sky right now, and anybody worth his salt is probably setting up their telescope right now.
I don't know, it's pretty windy out there.
Yeah.
It is?
That's what stopped me yesterday, the wind.
Yeah, full moon and wind, that'll be good for it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right. The moon is gibbous last night.
Yep.
And I suppose tonight it's gibbuser.
Gibbuser, yeah.
But my trees aren't moving.
I disappeared. That's pretty good. Oh, I came back. What the hell? I don't know where I was. I was in a different place. and disappear
light
again.
on the subject. So my telescope's in the hospital right now. I sent it back to France and they're working on it. Trying to get
What
rid of
happened?
those halos around. Since the day I bought it, instead of having blobs of stars that were, the
There we
brighter
go.
the star, the bigger the
All
blob.
right. Hi, everybody. I'm Andy. I've been with the club on and off for 33 years.
Never mind, that was something else.
Can't figure out why I keep appearing and disappearing.
Well, you're green now.
Yeah, that's scary.
Must be something you ate.
I think your Bayer code is wrong.
I don't know. I'm not just
Are you RGDB or BGGR or GBRG?
whatever these things have, so. Hmm, that's interesting.
Yeah, if I could share the screen, I'll show you what I've got on the one photo, what one exposure looks like. Let's see.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, this is what I'm getting. It's a 3-minute exposure with a just an L-Pro filter, just a regular light pollution filter. Just not much coming out. The stars are pretty round, but the sensor glows all in there. I'd just expect more than what I'm getting. You know, I got the
You just
dust.
Need to stretch a little more.
But for M81, I should be getting a better photo than that. It's just kind of washed out.
Yeah, you just play with contrast, brightness, curves. Did you do any post processing on that?
Now, this is just a single exposure out of it.
Yeah,
You've got a lot of stuff in there, that's for sure.
for 3 minutes, that's good.
Yeah.
But that is I'm doing binning 2x2 because I've been using that Astro Tools to determine what matches with the telescope. So it's at the optimal scene condition and all that. So that's what it said for using an RC8 with okay scene. It should be a binning by 2. But that's the kind of stuff I've been getting.
Well, your black is way off the bottom,
Right.
so you've got a lot of headroom there. You got plenty of highlights in there, and all you need to do is expand the range in the middle there.
Okay.
And I don't know what tool you've got to do that. You need to find out what stretching is all about.
Yeah, I'll have to look at it some more. Like I said, this is just out of the camera how it is.
Yeah, just
Sure.
one frame.
That looks
Yeah.
better than mine coming out of the camera. I
Does
think
it?
that's gonna
Okay.
be a dandy shot. Nice
Yeah,
round
you got a lot of,
size.
you can see a lot of detail hiding in there.
Yeah,
Okay. Because when I tried doing this in PixInsight, I can't even it can't even determine what object it is. You know, it does that. I can't remember what they call it, but they're doing the plate solving in that, so it can do the color correction and all that properly. And it can't even determine what it is when I stack all this stuff.
So totally stacked, it can't figure it out.
It can't figure it out, yeah.
so this
And it actually looks worse than this, which is strange.
is a
because the-
single 3-minute exposure or a stack totaling 3 minutes.
I stacked a bunch of them. I've got 72 of these.
Okay,
You know, I
Oh.
figure that'd be enough data along with flats, darks, and flat darks.
Is this
Or
the
dark
output of
plants.
all 72?
Not all 72. I mean, they're like, they're all the same. I've got like, I think, 30 darks, maybe 50 of the flats and 50 of the dark flats. Because those go so quick, 2 seconds a piece.
How many lights
72.
for this image?
Yeah, 72 of these.
Okay.
But anyways, that's what I've been working on. I'm just trying to determine what I'm doing wrong. Maybe it's PixInsight. Something I'm doing wrong there, but I just thought I'd have more data here.
Yeah.
Than what I'm seeing, but
You need somebody that understands PixInsight.
yeah, I was gonna bother Andy. I just haven't done it yet.
Yeah,
See, I found Brian's recording. If you want me to share that, we
Sure.
could play it, see what happens. Let's see, where is it? There it is.
this is fantastic, Brian. I can't, words fail me.
Well, that's good. I learned the hard way, so you don't have to. Okay, so using the knowledge of your camera's read noise and dynamic range, you're gonna pick a starting point for gain. We went through that little exercise, and that was the audience participation. Hopefully you guys got that.
Brian, would you mind starting all over from the beginning?
No, what we'll do is we'll take my slideshow and Brian's slideshow, and we will post those to the group's IO.
And I'm not a freaking genius. I'll show you all of the references at the end of this.
So much of this is something, it's not that hard. It just needed to be explained by somebody. As Feynman once said, if you can explain it in simple terms, you understand it.
Okay. I made this for 8th graders, so that was good. If I made it for a 4-year-old, I'd have to go get one to explain it. Okay, so use read noise and dynamic range. Fantastic. That's a good way to start. You guys know how to use that.
We're not seeing the video.
Don't go into the part of the gain range where the read noise gets flat, because basically it's going to reduce your dynamic range. If it gets flat,
So you're not seeing it?
Oh, no.
No.
You said,
All I'm seeing is your directory.
Okay, sorry. Let me do
If
this.
it
Let me
shows
try a
step
different way.
reduction like that one that we showed, best gain value.
Let's try it this way.
This is fantastic, Brian. I can't, words fail me. Is that where you started recording?
That's good. I learned the hard way, so you don't have to. Okay, so using the
And the explanation that he made in the 5 minute preceding my comment was what knocked my socks off.
Well, he had the slideshow. I don't remember if he sent that to us or not. Let me try sharing this way.
How's PixInsight been working for you, Mark?
Good. I mean, if you want, instead of trying to fool around I could bring up a couple things that I did with it. It's on the other computer. But yeah, I was able to watch a couple of demos, and one of them was from start to finish, simple ABC to get a color
Okay.
image. So I've been able to do that, and I recreated it to do it. Let me do this. I'm going to put this on mute.
Groups IO.
So are you having some French wine from the Lautrec painting? You're muted.
My wife likes this painting because it captures her enthusiasm of being a housewife.
I never looked at it from that perspective. My goodness. Her enthusiasm. Okay. I somehow don't think you just sit around and she hands you drinks.
I think she's talking about every woman.
Yeah, so we have a busy April coming up. 2 events that first week of April, right before is that right before the eclipse, right? Right after Easter?
I just heard from Greg Cisco. He's a little bit late. He's going to join us in a few minutes. Hey, Mark, are you talking?
No, he's muted. No.
Greg says he's trying to get in, but Mark's not letting him in.
All right, I am muted now. So here's the three subs. Red, green, and blue, and then here's the combination. And then through the Pix Insight Magic,
Mark, let Greg in.
you get that. So you go from red, green, blue, subs to red, green, blue, and then the enhanced of all the good stuff. I see.
What's the enhanced come from? What data is there that gives you that?
What data for this?
Yeah, that enhanced thing.
I use. Well, first of all, I masked the nebula and then worked on the background
Yeah, got that.
for denoise. And then with the mask, then I worked on the nebula a little bit with noise reduction.
I was just curious when you said then that's where the magic happens in this.
Right. Well, this is like the Photoshop end. When you go into doing the curves and saturation and the mask generation.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is straight red, green, blue.
I got that. Yeah.
And then this one was with the curves and the saturation. So that's what I've been able to do with it so far. This is data from 2019. So yeah, with the unsharp mask, color saturation, and the curves on the color. So not too much. But what I like about it is that you're able to work on one thing at a time. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing that.
Hey, Greg. Hi, Greg.
All right. I'm out of the other computer. That was tricky running Zoom on two computers. So the process of with the weighted batch processing for the flat starks flat darks and the lights. That's just around 3 minutes on the new computer I bought, the gaming computer.
Well, it was really fascinating to see the behind the scenes work that PixInsight does as the scripts run and the console messages go running by. Too fast to read, but I got the gist of how much work it's doing,
Yeah.
you know.
And what's nice is, so as I went through those different variations or whatever you want to call it, with the color curves and all that, there's a preview screen for all of this. So you can mess around with it. And if you like it, you could save it or do a save as and go back to work on the original thing you worked on and try something different and then compare the different outputs that you have. I like that part. It was like that on AIP for Windows, but what happens on PixInsight, it saves and names everything as the processes that you did on it. So it'll name it that you did the color curve, or they'll name it that you did a dynamic crop, or whatever it is, function that you did. Where when I was doing it, I would have to manually name all these things. So my list would be, NGC 6960, blah, 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 stacked and decon. Then the next one will be stacked decon gamma, stacked decon linear, stacked decon something else, And then by the time I was done, the naming of it showed me the history of what I did. Now I could go into the header of it, but what I like about PixInsight, it does it as the file. It just generates it as a file name. So Greg, you want to talk about your guiding adventure?
It was something. It included almost blowing up my telescope and ASI Air and all my cameras.
Well, we're recording this, so be careful what you say.
Okay, the guiding works great. Have no problems with it. It's the most scientifically advanced thing you can do with a telescope. It's almost like I felt like I was Lieutenant Sulu navigating the Enterprise to another target there with my tablet. But
You
in
did
short,
go to the Romulan sector.
yeah, no, in short, I think the bottom line is when you have a long focal length telescope, you definitely need a long focal length guider, which I had no idea about for years. I always wondered why people had really large guiding scopes on their main scope, and in some cases they had small guiding scopes. I didn't really understand what the differences were with the two or why they were needed, but the more I looked into it, the more it became obvious with the F10 Schmidt-Cassegrain. Your better option is to guide with a star that has the same magnification and focal length as the object you're trying to guide. So what I was doing with the 120 millimeter guide scope was, that guide scar had a very low magnification, and I'm using whatever object I'm trying to image with the Edge HD at f10 or f7, but it's a much greater focal length than 120 millimeters. So while my object was moving around, however it was moving around because of the error in the tracking, the guide wasn't able to keep up with it because the guide star magnification was so much lower than the object I was imaging, and that's a bad deal. So I actually have my suspicions about people who say that, an Edge scope that's 2000 millimeter focal length, they can use a guide scope of 600 millimeters. I'm not 100% sure about that, because as the magnification goes up, everything else goes up, including any error that you might see. And I think you're far better off to guide at the same magnification and focal length that you're imaging. And unfortunately, as was mentioned in the mailing list, the casualty there is the cost of being able to do business.
Yeah.
So I did not, I can tell you this, you can keep this on the live recording. I did not like paying $400 for an ASI 174. That's $400 is an awful lot for a guide camera. But when you look into what's what with guiding for edge telescopes, the Celestron off-axis guider has a huge prism that you need because at that high focal length, your option for stars is very limited. So you want a bigger area to be able to pick off a guide star with. And the 174 has a huge sensor with gigantic pixels. So you can really oversaturate the 174 and pick up the really faint guide stars. All right, well, I didn't know that, and apparently that's valued at $700 to be able to get that going. But I'm telling you, once it's going, from what I had going on yesterday, Bob came over actually and was out of my driveway for a couple hours, and it worked unbelievably well. It was crazy. The guiding accuracy was like 80% of the time it was well under one arc second. And when the wind would kick up, then it would go above, 1 arc second and maybe go to 3 arc seconds or 4 or 5. But then the ASI air would know to stop imaging until everything settled and it picked up again. So that was just really fascinating to see how that whole process played itself out. And then when I tried to stack my 50 or so M1 images from last night, Deep Sky Stacker had no problem stacking all those images, where before with the old guide camera, I ended up with that fuzzy mess that I forwarded to the group, to the mailing list. So yeah, I think I learned a lot. If you have a large focal length, especially a SCT, I think the best solution is the off-axis guider. And the Celestron, here you go, the Celestron off-axis guider is designed to have the proper back focus for the edge. So it was all pretty much painless once you, well, except for the dollar amount. But
So Greg, does the off-axis guider ability to rotate around to find a guide star?
it does, and the limiting part of the ASI off-axis guider is there are tabs in the apparatus where you've got your off-axis guider, and then there's end pieces on each side of the off-axis guider that will attach to the telescope and the camera end. And those brackets have tabs in them which limit their rotation to like 20 degrees, 30 degrees or something. The Celestron off-axis guider has no tabs, and you can freely rotate 360 degrees and be able to pick a guide star. The cool thing about the whole thing is once you set up for guiding for the night, the ASI Air will go through and do a calibration. And what it's doing is it's determining, depending on how you have your guide camera rotated, which way is left, right, up, and down. So once it does that calibration, it will automatically pick up a guide star and start guiding and give you the information of how well you're guiding or not. And okay, so you're done with M1 and you slew over to the Eskimo Nebula was one that we tried. And I used my Star Trek interface on my tablet to pick off the Eskimo Nebula. I clicked OK on the tablet screen. I didn't even have to use the hand controller or anything. And it just magically went there and centered itself. And then it automatically picked up a guide star that it happened to find in the guide camera's field of view. I didn't have to do anything. So when it works like that, it's just unbelievably cool. It's the coolest thing I've had happen to me since I first got my first telescope and pointed it at the brightest star in the sky when I was 13, and it ended up being Saturn and got me hooked. This is another thing that got me hooked. So it was really cool.
Hey, Greg, how are you doing your polar alignment? With the polar scope, or do you have some other
Yes.
way of doing it?
So I've got a polar scope with the right angle viewer. You know, you can buy that on Amazon for like
Right.
$60. And that actually works pretty well. So I've got a Celestron
Okay.
polar scope. I've got the right angle finder, and after a while, you can kind of get it close. It's not going to be 100% accurate, but what I found out is close enough is good enough, as it
Right.
turns out. So you do your polar alignment with the polar scope, then you start up the ASI Air. As long as you get focused, you put the ASI anywhere and you do a preview shot of whatever it is you're looking at. And if you have stars in focus, you hit the little icon that says plate solve. And it,
Okay.
boom, it knows where it's at. It's like I did a star sense alignment in 15 seconds. And then
Okay.
because it plate solved and knew exactly where it was with all those gazillions of stars in that picture, you tell it to go to M1 and it goes to M1. It plate solves. Once it gets there and says, oh, I'm off a little bit, and it makes an adjustment to recenter it. And it might do that a couple times, but it's
Right.
like magic, I'm telling you. I didn't have to do a polar alignment other than the alignment through the polar scope of the AVX, even though the ASI Air has a polar alignment routine, which is really cool.
Okay.
And what it does is it takes a picture, you set up your scope in the default home position, which is pointed at Polaris.
Right.
And it takes a picture. Once you start your polar alignment routine with the ASI Air, it takes a picture like StarSense would do. And then it moves the scope like 60 degrees, takes another picture like StarSense would take, and it does that a couple times, and then it's polar aligned. And what it will do at that point, it's got enough information, it will find a bright star somewhere like 30 degrees off of the meridian, and it gives you a little bullseye with this bright star. You don't even know what star it is. It's just a bright star that it picked, and your job is to move the control knobs for the azimuth and the right ascension. You have to move those control knobs to physically move the mount until the bright star that it's selected is centered in this reticle, and it'll tell you how far off it is. And that works fine. It's totally cool, like everything else with the ASI Air. But what I found last night, and something Bob has been telling me that I guess Mark Christensen's been doing for years, a lot of other people probably, is once you get guiding going and it's working relatively well, you don't need to worry about that polar alignment. I did not do a polar alignment routine through the ASI Air last night. This was a test of how well does the guiding work after I do an alignment through the polar scope.
Okay.
And it worked unbelievably well. I hope I never have to do a polar alignment through the AVX or through the ASI Air, to be honest with you. I just want to do
Yeah, I used
the guiding. I paid $700. I want to get my money's worth every night. You know, that's where I'm at today. I'm
Well,
trying to
Greg,
justify.
you mentioned, close enough on the polar alignment, and there's a lot to that. And let's see if this is still true. The theory is that you want to correct in the same direction in right ascension all night. I mean, I'm sorry, in declination all night, because you want to avoid back and forth motor backlash on the guiding.
Mhm.
And so if you're a little off, you're always going to correct in the same direction, which means your motor is going to bump in the same direction all night long. Now, when you go to flip, to the other side with a polar scope, the first couple times, it's going to have some backlash, but then that'll settle out. The other thing is on right ascension then, is that if your scope is off weight a little bit and you're always pushing or you're always pulling, you're going to correct in the same, either stop the motor or speed it up a little bit. You won't be stopping it all the time. So you want to have it where you want to be pushing that right ascension so that motor is engaged, and then it'll only stop. It won't, you know what I'm saying? It'll stop if you go too fast. So
I do.
if you're right on the pole in declination, you're going to be on both sides of the zero line all night long, and you're going to have backlash all night long. And what I find is it'll always overcorrect itself because you're catching up. Oh, then I'm going to go back the other way.
Oh,
So when I
so
do my guiding, I love to see the graph where it's always in one direction, correcting in one direction.
yeah, I have heard people say that you do get better guiding when you're purposely off just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
I saw something and I never understood what that was about. So thanks for explaining that.
Because when you do your corrections, you're making tiny little corrections. Well, the mount is right. You're not doing it manually anymore. But that was always a problem when we were doing it manually. You'd be pressing your button for declination, and the motor would have to catch up. And now all of a sudden it catches and swings past. So now you're constantly in that double reticle trying to get that star centered. But if you're always going the same direction, you can bump it just a little bit, and it goes back to that. And if it goes off a little bit, it'll bump it back to get there.
So I think Bob was trying to tell me about this because so I don't know anything about guiding. I certainly know nothing about a meridian flip. And even though I've been in the hobby since 1969, the reason for that is I've never had like a motorized equatorial mount where something could run into the mount. I've always had either a wedge or a Dobsonian.
Right.
So this is my first time. I had to actually ask, I think I asked Bob the dumbest question in the world, which is, why do you need to do a meridian flip? Because I had no idea. I never did a meridian flip before. I didn't know that the thing would bang into the mount. When I converted my Dobsonian, my 10-inch F6 Dobsonian to equatorial wedge, it still didn't have a counterweight that I would bang into anything.
Equatorial wedge.
Yeah. So I had no idea.
Well, the
So-
good news is the newer mounts now go well past the meridian. So it's, you'll take it back and it might go another, instead of here, it'll go past it maybe this much yet. And then it'll do the flip.
But you always want to have like the weight set up so that the motor has got the weight on the tension so that
Yeah. Right.
yeah.
Right.
And that's the thing I got to get used to. I hear what people are saying, but until I actually do it, I guess
Right. Well, just set everything up inside and do it manually. Okay, here's how far I'm going to go. Whoops, now here's where it's going to do the meridian flip. Right. So one more thing about the guiding part and all that. And if you're doing color, it's not an issue. But if you're doing red, green, blue, or narrow band, my practice has always been if you're going from the eastern horizon to the meridian, I start with a red filter, then a green filter, then a blue filter if I'm doing red, green, blue, because blue filter close to the horizon, you're not going to get much, right? Just look at the sunset, it's red, right? And blue is above. And so if I go from meridian to the west, it's opposite. I'll start with a blue and then a green and then a red at the end. And then when I do the hydrogen alpha, that's either the very first thing or the very last thing I'll do. Because again, that's closer to the horizon and some of that I'll get through. So that's just another, probably you could say good practice to get the best results from the wavelengths of light that are coming through the atmosphere.
I would have never thought of that with the wavelengths of light near the horizon like that, but it makes sense.
That's what makes doing the central Milky Way objects difficult, because they're down in the muck, right? Basically, like the M8 and M20, and they're pretty low. Versus Orion Nebula, which is nice and high in our sky. So, but this is the east to west transit of the object. That's what I normally would do, is the red, green, blue, and then green, or blue, green, red the other way.
So I guess I don't know much about meridian flip either. Does the scope have to totally like flip around? Is that what
Yeah.
happens?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then for guiding, it's got to reset. You got to recalibrate guiding on the other side.
Okay.
What kind of telescope do you have?
An edge, that 14-inch edge with the CGE Pro mount. So,
Well, when you've got a German equatorial, you've got a post underneath it. And you've got a counterweight hanging to balance your telescope.
Mhm.
Meridian flip simply has to be done when you're doing on the east side or the west side. When you switch to the other side, your counterweight shaft is going to bang into your post.
okay.
You can't track all the way from the east to the west without running into your mount, your tripod or your post.
Okay.
And that's why you do a meridian flip, just to switch over so that you can continue the direction that you've been going.
Okay.
Isn't it to take the air out of a
that's the
gear or
planning
something
part.
also?
Pardon me?
Isn't a meridian flip, at least on the older mounts, having to do with anything that might be off on a gear, so it's not compounding by keep rotating around? And that's why it might go around the other way, because any error that might be built into that gear itself. At least I thought that's one of the reasons we had to do that. Though mine now is a belt drive, so that's a little different.
The meridian flip is just to get clearance from the mount that's underneath, the
Okay,
tripod, because there's interference between the counterweight and the base. That's simple.
Well, you
Now,
don't
what
want
you're
the
talking about-
counterweight. You don't want the counterweight higher than the optical tube.
right.
It's no good.
What you're talking about, I think, is when you flip to the other side, you may be rubbing against the other side of the teeth.
Right.
And that's why you always make the east side of the telescope the heaviest side.
Okay.
Like Mark says, you always want to be pushing that telescope. So if
Right.
the east side is heavy and you're on the east side, you're pushing
Right.
that telescope towards the west. However, if you're on the west side of the telescope, you don't want to be pulling it down to the west.
Yeah, you don't want to have the braking on.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
you switch to the other side of the gear perhaps. And sometimes that other side of the gear has a bump that the first side doesn't have. Because gears are just physical objects and they have flaws. Or something. And if the gear has a little bump in it, a little imperfection, every time it spins, imperfection. Going this way, there may not be any imperfection at all. After you've flipped.
Right.
If you're counter, if, but
So Greg, here's a suggestion with the ASI stuff. Is that when you do have to, let's say you're gonna image for 6 hours, right? 3 hours on each side of the meridian. And when you get your first 3 hours, fine, everything's calibrated and everything's working fine. Okay, so now you have to go to the other side. Well, you have plenty of time to do all of this. Again, here's what I would do, not knowing all the details. I would go back to home position and then recalibrate the star alignment. Okay, let a plate solve again, because now your object is on the other side of the meridian, and just let it go through. And it shouldn't take that long. If you're doing 5 or 10 minutes, fine. Then you go back to your imaging, and now you just complete your next 3 hours. So to give up 5 or 10 minutes in the middle of everything to do that flip and get it reassigned and recalibrated is well worth it, because then it's over. But I try to do it without recalibrating a couple times, and you're just chasing it the rest of the night. The whole thing, the mount's chasing it, you're trying to figure out what's wrong. But if you put it back home position, recalibrate everything, just like you're starting over, it's well worth the 10 minutes to do that, if it takes that long.
Mm-hmm.
let's say your telescope, the tube itself is cattywampus on the mount. It's just a little bit to the left and it's just a little bit too high. And so when you rotate it around the north axis, it's doing what my finger did. Instead of going like this, the telescope is doing a cone.
Right.
So now if you calibrate everything with the telescope off on this side of the meridian, you notice it's off to the right and high. Okay, so you flip it over to the other side. Now it's off to the left. In fact, it'll be off to the left and low on the other side. So what Mark is saying, this software can null out all that cattywampusness on this side. But it's exactly backwards when you flip the whole shebang to this way.
Right.
So so better to just say, forget it. We got a whole different telescope.
Right.
We got it on this side of the mount. Teach the software the new cattywampus and let the software solve all that.
Yep.
And you don't have to chase it.
Yep. And then when you're image processing, big deal, you flip everything over. Your image processing will take care of flipping the actual image. You don't care about that. And especially like if Grace describing how the ASI does all this plate solving stuff, your object is going to be centered back in there anyway. And your guide star is going to be a big deal. You find a new guide star. How long?
That's right.
So all I'm saying is, so Greg, you rehearse this in the house. And just so you know the sequence of it, and then the first couple of times you do it, you're doing it slowly and carefully. But then you could image for 6 hours easy. The way this is going.
I think that the ASI Air has a meridian flip option that I should probably test.
You should test it.
Yeah, it's a scary thing though.
For those of us that have always used equatorial mounts, it's not, but I can understand where you're coming from with that. Yep. So the other part of that is, like I said, the first couple times I did that, like out in the field, you kind of get nervous. Am I going to do it right? But the object that you're imaging is still going to be there. If it's 10 minutes from now or half hour from now, you get everything set up. Like Bob said, the ASI is like, it's a new session. It doesn't care.
Yeah, the ASI Air is pretty good at picking up where it left off.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah.
And it's
Those of us that
crazy.
are still doing it manually, you have to put the thing back in.
Well, the
Take
way
a
that
while.
the way that it picks up where it left off is you go to a picture that you took like a couple days ago of whatever object it was, you bring it up in the ASI Air, and then there's like a go-to button.
Okay.
So you hit go to and it goes where the picture is, and then it does a plate solve to put you exactly where you need to go. And then it has like a reticle, which is red for where you're supposed to be and blue for where your camera is. So you can like rotate your
Okay.
camera and get in the right.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculously easy. And then when you look at the overall master panel of the sky, it's like a stellarium view, and then it's got a square where your camera is. If the thing isn't really centered and you don't want to do like a plate solver, that you can just move your finger around that screen and move the square, the blue square, which is where you're looking, move that around to where you want it to go, and then you hit the button and it just moves it a little bit to recenter it manually. You never have to touch your hand controller.
Wow.
It's crazy. It's
Wow.
magic. It's like I was on the bridge of the Enterprise last night. It was crazy.
Now you just have to be indoors like Andy, and you got it made.
Yeah, well, I'm not even sure I'm up for the 6-hour imaging thing you're explaining. So I'm thinking, at 3 hours when I got to do the meridian flip, I'm calling it a night because I don't think I can do the 30-hour image of whatever object it may be.
Oh, see, at home I
10-hour
have the
image.
automatic no meridian flip because of a tree. I can't get there anyway, so
Yeah.
no, that's all really good to hear, Greg, that this is the technology is workable and dependable.
Yeah, well, it took me 2 years to get there, and that was the driving force behind my purchase of the AVX, was to be able to see if I could get full functionality with the ASI Air. But the AVX is $1,000. So
Yeah.
like I'm complaining about $700 for the guiding scope or the guide off-axis guider and the camera.
I forgot, Greg, are you still married?
Yeah, but that's not the point.
But that's
It's
why
not-
he's been selling all his other stuff. See,
I
Okay.
sold all my telescope stuff that I've advertised to the club has been sold. I also sold a $2,000 Marshall stack, 50-watt Marshall head. The whole stack should have gone for over $4,000, but I sold it really quick for the 2,000 because that's the exact amount I needed for the edge and the 0.7 focal reducer. So I've been converting a lot of sales into this upgraded equipment. So,
that's the way to
but
do
yeah,
it.
it's just ridiculous. So the problem is, it's not really the money so much as if you buy something at that price and it doesn't work out, now what do you do?
Yeah.
So luckily I was able to buy the ASI Air stuff for a very reasonable price used from Andy. So yeah, so the Pro that Andy had, once he saw my progress, he said that he'd trade me even up for the Plus. So now I've got a Plus. So can't thank him enough for all the help he's given me. So
I need to correct myself. I just went over and played with my mount. It's not the counterweight that's interfering, it's the back end of the telescope.
Yeah, the back end of the scope.
Yeah.
I don't know, I just got confused for a second. So if you're looking at something on the east side, that's to the east, that scope can only go so high before the back end of the scope hits the mount, hits the legs.
Yeah, and actually it should be in the handbook or the instructions of the mount, how far
Yeah.
it's practical is for that, because I think on my CGEM, it's pretty far past the
Yeah.
the meridian.
But the real point is that's why you have to do a flip.
Right.
Simply because the back end of the telescope hits the legs. That's all.
No,
Where that
actually,
happens,
actually your camera hits it,
yes.
which is probably worse.
It's quite obvious. Take your mount and your scope, set it up during the daylight hours. Pretend you're looking at something at the east and just run that around, pretend you're following a star, and you'll see that you're only gonna go so far before,
Right.
oh, that's why I have to
Okay.
flip to the other
Yeah,
side.
it's obvious I need to do that.
Yeah, it's real simple. Yeah, pretend you're following a star follow the sun from sunrise to sunset, but you can't do it.
Well, you know, when you do, you could actually see that in action when you do your star alignment, and you pick a star that's near the meridian during your three-star alignment or something,
Mhm.
and if it's past the meridian, you'll see that your scope will go to the other side.
Okay.
It won't bend backwards, right? It'll oh, it's not there, so I got to go to the other side.
Okay. Interesting.
Looks like John dropped off. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Brian, because I didn't see his PowerPoint on that calibration and gain and all that, and see if you can put that on the regular groups IO for us. Okay, well, it's about 8:15. Anybody else want to keep going or whatever you want to do?
I just want to do one thing, if you don't mind. This thing behind me, it's my first, well, not my first, but my early astrophotography with the first Canon Astro camera, the little Rebel Astro camera. Single shot. Out on the farm through that, we've got a 12-inch out there, but that's a single shot out in the dark sky. But that was my very first astrophotography thing.
So that looks about 3 minutes.
Well, I think we're talking less than that, maybe two, maybe one to
Okay.
two.
Yeah.
Was that with film?
No, it's a slide.
Digital?
No, I
The
don't think
Canon
it's digital.
T3?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
digital.
Okay.
Very nice,
Mhm.
Armin, that, I'm
But I'm
looking at
just
that
like,
and I'm amazed at how round those stars are.
But they're fat. Okay.
Oh, that's an early camera that,
Yeah, that's right. I still have it. It still works. So I was fiddling around and I saw it and I thought, well, I'll run it through Photoshop, see what it looks like. There it is. So that you can do in dark skies.
yeah, it does make a difference.
Hardly any effort.
But you know what? That's that fork mounted Meade, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That thing's a beast.
Well, the fork mounts are they're easier and harder to pull or align. One way or the other.
But once you're set, in an observatory like this is.
Oh, you have,
so,
yeah.
Yeah, you're done.
The other problem.
I wouldn't carry them around and do anything with them.
Yeah.
The other problem with a fork mount is that it's difficult, if not impossible, to shoot at the Meridian because your camera hanging off the back bangs into the base between the fork.
Well, I think the Meads had extra long forks to account
Yes, they do.
for, yeah.
It
especially
doesn't,
for-
I've never run into the base with anything,
Yeah.
with stuff on the back or anything, so.
I've never had a fork mount. That's probably why. Always the German Equatorial. That's in my mind. That's
Yeah.
on my mind. Which is why when I got Jim's Dobsonian, it took a while for me to get that in my mind, how I was pointing the telescope and moving the telescope.
Yeah, fork mount, no Meridian flip.
No. So Doug, I know that you had talked about wanting to do some planetary stuff. So maybe we could plan on the next star party or something that we set up some time, and I'll bring my planetary scopes and we can practice on the moon or something.
Okay, that would be great. Yeah, sorry I didn't make it out. It was a little too cold and breezy for the last one.
Yeah, it was pretty windy out there.
So hopefully the next one coming up next month, I'm gonna try and get out there. So,
Okay.
yeah, let's plan on that. Do some experimenting.
Okay, well, if that's good, then I'll stop recording and then I'll upload this.
Yeah, this is another fun session. Greg, it was great listening